Welcome back to Speducation. I am your host, Brandon Reed, and as always, if this is your first time to the channel, a special welcome to you. Well, it's a new week and we have a new lesson. So, what are we going to be learning about? Today's lesson, online education. Is it good for special education? Ever since COVID, education in this country has, well, really changed. Because before COVID, online education was reserved to charter schools. And as somebody who is taught in not only the traditional setting, but also an online setting, I know the benefits and the drawbacks of teaching in both online and traditional. But a lot of parents are probably wondering, well, is online education good for my child? Would they better be served if they were taking classes online instead of in a traditional classroom? Well, that's a good question. So let's look at some of the pros and cons of online education. So before we can look at the pros and cons, first we need to actually understand what online education is. Online education is defined as education being delivered in an online environment through the use of the internet for teaching and learning. This includes online learning on the part of the students that is not dependent on their physical or virtual co-location. Online education. The pros. Well, for special ed students, it's more individualized. That's right, because being online means that the lessons can be individualized for the student's needs through such things as self-paced. A lot of students may feel overwhelmed or have anxiety in a traditional classroom when all the other students are just flying through the material. But for them, it takes them a while. Well, through online education, the student can go at their own pace and they don't feel as rushed, and the anxiety level is slightly less. It also allows students to take risks. One of the things that I notice as a special ed teacher is that a lot of special ed students, they don't really like taking risks. And the reason why is because they're afraid of what the other students may think of them if they get the answer wrong. But in an online education, they are kind of hidden away from everybody else. Even though they may be in an online class, the other students can't really see them, and the special ed student can't see the other students. So the anxiety of being singled out in front of everybody is kind of taken away. And more one-on-one support. Now, special ed students do get provided some one-on-one support or small group support in the traditional setting. But on online education, the teacher and the student can set up individual times where they can meet. Let's say 1 to 1:30 or 2 to 2:30. Whereas in a traditional setting, the teacher may not necessarily be able to do that because they have to go from one location to the next. But online education provides you with that opportunity. Now, those are some really great pros, but what about cons? Well, less direction from the teachers is one. And this is something that I noticed from my son. Whenever they have e-learning days and they have to do online learning, sometimes the directions that the teachers give in the notes can be a little confusing. And so without having a teacher there to ask those questions or be able to bounce ideas off of, it can cause some stress and anxiety. Relies heavily on being independent. This is a tough one, especially for elementary and middle school students. Now, in high school, students are typically a little bit more independent because, well, they're a little bit older. But in elementary and middle school, it's not the case. Sometimes they need more supervision. And for a special ed student that has ADD or ADHD, it can be very difficult to keep on task and pay attention without somebody sitting there overlooking them. So unless a parent is sitting beside them, making sure that they're doing the work, special education online may not necessarily be a good thing. Lack of consistency. Well, the reason for this one is because students in special ed need structure. They need a daily schedule. They need consistency. And with online learning, even though they can work at their own pace, sometimes that lack of consistency can affect them because it may take them 45 minutes to do an assignment. well, that's fine. But if they have another assignment that they have to get done at a certain time or before the end of the day and they've run out of time, well, then they're in trouble. So having lack of consistency can be a stressor and it can cause anxiety. And the most important, it requires internet. When COVID hit and I was working in the traditional setting, it was really difficult for a lot of teachers and students to transition to online learning. And I remember the very first day that we were having to send students home, the teachers were rushing to make packets of papers and notes and assignments because we weren't prepared for online learning. Now we are, but not all students have access to internet. Believe it or not, there are some students that just don't have the money for it, and as a result, they may not be able to do the online learning. So online learning can be very beneficial. And there have been studies that have shown that certain special ed students actually have improved on online learning over the course of the years. But then there's also other studies that show that it has a detrimental impact. So why the contradicting studies? Well, that's because special education is not a one size fits all. It is based on the individual needs of the student. So before you decide that online education is right for your child, you may want to talk to your child, or you may want to talk to a professional, like a special education teacher, and see what are some of the pros and cons for yourself. And if you want to check out some more research on that, check out the links that I've included in the description of this video. And if you liked what you saw, you learned something new, or you're new to the channel, please click that like button. And if you want updates on future videos, feel free to click the subscribe button and ring the bell for updates on future videos. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, or there's a particular subject in special ed that you want me to talk about, by all means, drop a line in the comments section and I would be happy to talk about it. And until next time, class dismissed.